Hi everyone, greetings from Cape Town, South Africa. It is such a beautiful day here. October 11th, 2000. It's my eldest child's 20th birthday today. So it's quite a meaningful day for us, and we just had one celebration and she's off to the beach with her friends and we're gonna have another one later. I cannot believe it's been 20 years since I gave birth to my beautiful, beautiful firstborn daughter. We've got something very exciting to talk about today. I'm just gonna settle myself in for this because I want to get it right. I want to get it right for you guys. I have it right for me, but the biggest, not burden, but responsibility I feel I have in my life is to convey, is to confer through communication. Of course, it's our way of transference. I mean, we transfer in so many ways. We transfer through the energy we carry because it's constantly moving, it's conducting. We communicate that way. We communicate through our eyes. We communicate through our hands. I think I use my hands a lot. Sometimes I don't even realize it. Through body language, of course. And it means so much to have the opportunity to share this with you. It is so profound, and I really hope most of all that in its simplicity, it's not undervalued, underestimated. That would be the biggest mistake you could possibly make from what I have to share with you today. So let's all just get really comfortable wherever you are in the world. It's very early morning in America. It's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon here in South Africa and in Europe, and a truly, truly beautiful day. We're moving into summer here, so it's spring and so lovely. I know it's getting cold up in the Northern Hemisphere, but it's really finally warming up here, and wonderful days of sunshine to come. So, the biggest health secret of all time, right here, right now. And it truly, truly, truly is. So I want to say again, before I share with you what this is, I want to emphasize more. I cannot emphasize that you do not undervalue or underestimate this. We're going to take it apart once I discuss, I share what it is, and we're going to make sense of it in a big picture and in a more microscopic way. But let me first just kind of make sure you guys are all on and ready. Again, it's very early, but it's Sunday morning. A lot of you are sleeping, and we'll hear this later. The biggest health secret of all time is the forces of goodness. The biggest health secret of all time is the forces of goodness. What does that mean? It means that in order to have health, physical health, mental health, emotional health, sexual health, energetic health, financial health, any kind of area of health you could possibly wish for, the forces of goodness need to occupy that space. Which means we have to displace those forces in us, in all those areas that are not defined by goodness, with the forces of goodness. If we don't do that, nothing else will work. Nothing else will work over the long term. If we do it, we don't need anything else. And I want to, again, I'm going to dismantle this. We're going to make sense of it. And it's a lot to convey. But when we break it down to real terms in this modern world, which is so antithetical to the forces of goodness, which is why we're going to each have to take the initiative to restore the forces of goodness to all the areas of our life. So we have to start by doing a really big cleanup job. We have to look at everything. We have to look at every single thing that we do in our lives. And as we do so, we'll find that what is occupying the spaces in our being, occupying our real estate, is probably not the forces of goodness. I had to do a massive cleanup job in my life. I mean, I thought I was a pretty good person. I thought I generally did the right thing. I thought I had pretty good thoughts. And I certainly, for the longest time, did the best I could with my body. And I suppose, in a sense, that was an area where I had to focus less because I spent so much time sorting that out. But the things that go through our minds, the things we expose ourselves to, the things that are locked in our hearts, the things that we don't even see because they're blind spots, they're in our shadow. That's what means. That's what the shadow means. We don't see it. We're unconscious of it. All of those things, those areas, they need to get cleaned out. So this is obviously not a small task. This is the biggest task, but it is the most important task. And for those of you coming on now, I'm going to reiterate. The biggest health secret of all time is the force of goodness, is the forces of goodness, are the forces of goodness, however you want to say it. The force of goodness is the greatest health secret of all time. Again, physical health, mental health, emotional health, energetic health, sexual health, family health, business health. If the forces of goodness are not there, there will not be health. If the forces of goodness are there, you've done it. And as is said biblically, and often the biblical stuff comes up in these talks, by their fruits you shall know them. You won't have to look for it, it will be there. So what I want to do is open up the conversation. I want to know how it is that you understand and perceive are receiving what I'm sharing with you, so that I can help it be better understood if it's if that's needed. And I'm happy also to help you work through things in your life that are perhaps maybe out of alignment with the forces of goodness. So please feel free to ask questions as we go. Primarily, I want to convey the concept, and then we have to take this concept and we have to make it work. And my dream would be for all of you to fully embody, to be beings of the forces of goodness. And when that happens, everything in your life will change. You can't help. If you have goodness will result. But it's hard because I said in the last video, we all grew up in the same soup. We all came in with, came into the matrix, came into this mental web that force fed us feelings, that force fed us ideas, that force fed us food, that basically put into us what it was, making us a reflection of it. You are what you eat. Well, we ate it and we became it. So now we need to cleanse ourselves of it. As we do so, we'll displace that matrix energy with the forces of goodness, and we will have more and more ability, more strength to more easily displace more and more of it. That's how it works. The more of it we possess, the less power anything that isn't up to scratch with it will be able to have over us. Okay, let's see this way. I would love to know how you have cleaned out or even recognized any ungood forces that may have been present. Okay, love that question. Thank you, Danny. First of all, I realized how important it was to hunt them down. So number one, when we realize that this is the greatest secret and the forces are the greatest power, then we have to have a hierarchy of value in our lives. And then that becomes the top of the hierarchy. And if that's the top of the hierarchy of importance, holds the most value, then naturally we want to pursue, seek, and strengthen that so it becomes the priority. So first and foremost, we place it in its proper hierarchy of value at the very, very top. And secondly, it becomes the priority. So when it becomes the priority, we hunt it. We hunt down that which shouldn't be there so that we can scoot it out and put in its place those forces of goodness, so that little by little we knock it out. And so in hunting it, we pay close attention. You know, when you watch an animal on the savannah or in the jungle, it stalks its prey. You are the stalker, and your prey is the ungood, as Danny wrote, the ungood forces, the anti-good forces, those which would work against the forces of goodness, which would undermine, which would make you weak. Now, I want to tie this into what the matrix does. Remember, we've spoken about the fact that the matrix makes you weak. It's the only way it can have the power it has. It wields power because it makes you weak first. It makes you believe in it. It reverses the role of authority. And I don't want to get too off track here, but one of the goals I would have for all of us is to become sovereign, to be self-governing. And authority starts with AU, like authorship, like autonomous, like authentic. AU is the symbol for gold on the periodic table. Gold is the incorruptible substance. It's a noble metal, one of, I believe, 9 of the noble metals. So that incorruptibility is the goodness of which I'm speaking. So we have to pursue, hunt down, stalk these forces that are antithetical to the forces of goodness. And they're very weak. These forces are weak, and that's why when we carry them, we're weak. Because remember, it's like, I've explained this before in my courses, when you look in a mirror, the you is the power. But in the mirror, you have this reflection. But that reflection is useless. It doesn't have any energy. It has no force. It has nothing. You are the force. So what the forces of... I think we have a bit of a chiming in there. So the antithetical forces to life, they don't have any power. They have no creative energy. They have to only they mimic what is real, what is from the creative force, from what is true. And in mimicking that, it's the inverse. It's the opposite of. Everything's turned around and inverted. And when you invert life, you have the opposite of life, which is not life. Death is not the opposite of life. Death is actually a stage of life, but no life. You have the absence of life. Maybe that's the way to put it. So we stalk, and we stalk. So we prioritize this so much that we stalk with precision and attention, absolute attention. And what we find is usually quite shocking. And the problem is we've been taught a few things, well, so many things that undermine us in the matrix. But one of the things we've been taught is that we should just kind of allow ourselves to be weak, to be full of faults, to have addictions and inclinations toward a sort of, let's say, a path of least resistance. Oh, go easy on yourself. Oh, don't worry, you're only human. I like to say we have human, but we're not only human. So we have to have a different expectation of ourselves. We have to hold ourselves to a higher standard, not in a sense that we become judgmental in a negative way, like, oh, because the old way of thinking is, we don't want to see what's wrong, because that would make us wrong. That would make us bad. That would make us inadequate. That would make us all the things that we've been trained by the Matrix to fear most. To be rejected, to be to be abandoned because we're not good enough, because we don't sort of cut mustard. We're just we're that inadequacy. We're so afraid of that we don't want to look at these shadows, because we're afraid of what we might find. And if instead, however, we were to look at these things as treasures, as we find these shadows, we find these forces of these weak inclinations, these patterns and habits that are antithetical to goodness, we find them and we celebrate the finding of them, and they become our treasures, and we can take it from that perspective. Then it's a celebration every day, because obviously we're going to find a lot. I mean, anyone who's done physical cleansing and has had the experience of consecutive colonics and all of this, you know how much is in there. Well, the same is true for the physical, for the emotional, the mental, all these other fields of our being. There is so much. We'll find treasure troves every day, but the fact that there's so much shouldn't deter us, because with every bit we accomplish, we're going to be that much better off. And remember, the forces of good are actual energetic forces. They actually bring something. So as we displace the negative forces, if you want to call them that, we're actually going to have something in our arsenal, and that something fills our space. And actually, it's like the candle in the dark room. You just need one candle. So a couple of epiphanies, and coming to awareness of these negative forces inside of us, they start to light up the whole room. And suddenly, it doesn't actually matter if you see every last one. The more you see, the better. But you're gonna get the whole category. You're gonna get the whole grouping. It's all gonna make sense. Like if you're going through your day and you're stalking, as you must do, you're stalking yourself and you're stalking your thoughts and your habits, and you see jealousy pop up. Well, that's going. If you can look at it and say, "Oh wow, I just found a treasure. I just had a moment of jealousy." Well, where does that come from? Wow, look at where that was hiding. I would have typically looked away from that, but I'm looking at it, and I'm seeing how it got integrated into my being, where it came from, what the programs were that made me, feel this way, and now I know that it doesn't serve me to have this in me, and I can let it go, and I don't have to be that person who wants to be that thing or have that thing, because it actually is antithetical to life anyway, because it's maybe something about a material possession, or some idea of a lifestyle, or something, anything. It could be anything. It could be a job. It can be, so many things. But you realize that catching that habit, catching that thought form, that feeling, enabled you to see how a whole pattern was playing out in your life. You see? And then you're like, oh wow, well, okay, that's where all those anti-energetic forces were going and eating me alive and making me weak. And if you overcome that jealousy program, you become so strong. Not in a fake way, not in a way like, oh yeah, I don't have to be wanting that, but you genuinely are over it, because you don't want that in your life. You want the forces of good in your life. And as those forces of good come in, you transform. You definitely become superhuman. If what we know is the norm is human, of course we know that normal isn't natural, but natural, of course, is already superhuman based on the norms, if you get my meaning. I mean, what's normal is what's typical, but what's natural is what we really are. And what is natural and what is typical are also completely at odds with each other, because we're taken out of the natural. So we get back to the natural, which is superhuman by our definition of human presently. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So you become the being that goodness built, and you get so much power, because what happens is the integrity is restored to the being. So if you think about it this way, you come into this world, you're born into this matrix, and all of these matrix directives are making you weak. They're breaking down the integrity of your body. They're breaking down the integrity of your mind. They're breaking down the integrity of your emotions. So you're feeling dysfunctional emotions most of the time, as opposed to functional emotions. Functional feelings are so important, and they enable you to engage with this 3D experience. Let's say eventually we'll go up the ladder to 5D and above, way above, but they enable you to engage with the natural world, with this life experience that we're having. And functional feelings enable you to identify what's good for you, what's good for your environment, and what's not. So, you have a bad feeling about someone. Now, if you are a healed person, you can trust that feeling. You have a good feeling about someone, you can trust that feeling. Now, if you're not a healed person, you have all this, you're still filled with these forces that undermine you and make you weak and give you tendencies toward, desires that aren't for your best good or your highest good, then you actually can't trust your feelings. You might have a really good feeling about someone because they're speaking to a part of you that is vulnerable and or has been trained to respond positively to that type of person. This is how narcissists can get in, and without you ever realizing it, you've been pulled into their world because of your dysfunctional feelings. For whatever reason, you were exposed to things in your young life that broke you in certain ways, that undermined the fabric of your integrity and your antennas, and so you become vulnerable to these things. So when we rectify this, we rectify everything in our life. We start to be able to make really good decisions. We can't self-govern, we can't be sovereign if we're at the mercy of these external forces that can manipulate us because we have these blind spots, because we have these shadows. So as Danny was asking, what have I done in my life? So I've stalked them ruthlessly because it really mattered, and I wanted to be the being that goodness built. I wanted to fully embody goodness. And the more you see them, the more you find that in seeing them, you strengthen, and it starts to compound. Your ability to notice them and your ability to heal from what you notice all kind of compounds, and it becomes a way of living. And then what happens is, if something comes up that is part of that old conditioning, it becomes so obvious. It's like if there was, I don't know, you're out in a beautiful garden, and here I am in my beautiful garden, and suddenly, a big tank comes through, blowing diesel fuel everywhere, and I don't know, playing some sort of incoherent sound or music or something, I don't know, just something completely that's not the garden energy comes in, something artificial and acidic and cacophonous. It's become so obvious, and you're like, oh, well, I can see that. That's so, that's just like so obvious. So it becomes really easy at a certain point. And then also, most importantly, you see the fruits. This is so, I can use that word obvious a lot, sorry. This is not a theory. I mean, it's you could say it's a theory. I believe it's a fact, but that, when we displace the antithetical forces of goodness with the forces of goodness, we restore. I believe that that's a natural, spiritual, universal law, absolute fact, but you could say it's a theory, but it's not hypothetical. It's not in the sense that you will feel it viscerally. You will know. Just I speak about this with the body too. It's when you're cleansing, you have people who will take all these supplements, and they'll take the noni berry stuff and the maca powders and the the superfood this and the superfood that and their green powders, and it's supposed to be good for me, right? And it must be really good for me because I'm told it's really good for me, but do I really feel better? Do I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'm better off for it? Typically not. So when you work the tissue cleansing work properly, because you feel like a kid, your energy skyrockets, your skin clears, the tissue in your body it tightens, the integrity comes back. It's all about integrity and disintegration. So when we're working with the forces of goodness, everything, the integrity strengthens. When the forces, the antithetical forces of life get involved, we deteriorate, we disintegrate. The integrity becomes loose, becomes weak. So if you can imagine all the layers, all the areas of your being growing in integrity, those forces of goodness, they're intelligent. They're hugely. They know what to do. They have know-how. Okay, so they go in and you don't have to tell them what to do. They know what to do. it's kind of like, people say, well, leave it to God, right? Leave it to the forces of goodness, and let them get into those threads and let them tighten them up and bring them together. And the more of it that there is, the more of it that the more it will dynamically engage. And imagine that happening emotionally, physically, mentally, energetically, on every level. Okay, you will become a being of goodness. And it's not because we want to be a goody two-shoes, because in fact, the idea of being good by the Matrix program is being kind of meek, maybe being nice, maybe doing good deeds, but it's all very external. We need to get it right inside first. People can be doing good deeds and charity work and a lot of nice things, but if they're still carrying these negative programs, it's all just external stuff that may temporarily have a positive effect in some way, which is nice, but it's not profound. It's not going to change the world. And a lot of people want to change the world, but they haven't fixed themselves, which is really ludicrous, because we all know it's a lot easier to fix someone else's life than fixing your own. So let's though not take the path of least resistance and see and complain about everything that's happening and what you might want to do out there in the world, when you're what's happening in your being, what's happening in your home isn't quite right. So it takes a lot of discipline, a lot of discipline. And that's where the Matrix also, it wants us to indulge, because the more we indulge, the more we're lazy, the more we watch TV, the more we are, just mindless and consuming things that we're addicted to, the weaker we become. So we have to exert a good bit of discipline, and that's hard for most people to get their heads around. It has to be the thing. It has to be as hard as it may be, what's harder, truly what's harder, is dying that slow death of becoming weaker and weaker and weaker, and not getting to live because you're not living with the forces of goodness. We talk about this, it's often said, like, people don't act, they're not actually living. Well, living isn't going out traveling and socializing and having big corporate jobs, making a lot of money, or even coming up with great, innovative ways of bringing sustainable things to the world. Those are all fine, and there's a place for them. But really living, if we think about what that means, it means embodying the forces of life, which are the forces of goodness, which you can put a lot of different names on. It's the force from the source. It's the source of the force. You can call it God. You can call it the Tao. But let's just all be on the same page here, that is the force of life, the forces of goodness. I like to call them right now, but the forces of life is fine too. So we have to be disciplined. We have to be disciplined in stalking these things that are in our emotional field, or in our mental field, and we have to exert a lot of discipline physically too, because if we don't bring the body to strength, then we're going to be. It's like say a car has 4 wheels. All 4 wheels have to have enough air in them and be well shaped and and functional. They all need to be equally roadworthy. And the more akin they are to one another, the more smooth the ride is going to be. So we want the physical body, the mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic aspects, all to be equally as filled with integrity, as built by the forces of goodness. Okay, I'm gonna look out for more questions. I'm really happy to take questions, so please. Let's see. One thing you can do is you can just start with a minute of goodness and just check yourself. What is my degree of goodness? What am I looking at? When I look inside my being, what's in my mind? What's in my force field? What's around me? What do I need to take care of? What's the most obvious thing? This is also with cleansing work. It's like, the first few weeks, it's so easy because, for most people, what they were consuming before they got into the work was all, pretty clearly not alkaline and pretty obviously dense and starchy and sugary and all these things. And so it's really easy to see those early things. So in that, that first minute, you can get a lot. And you can write it down. It's really good to write it down. Say, I see this in myself. I see that in myself. And do the opposite of what you would normally do. Instead of being like, you don't want to write, I have this pattern, because, it's like, do you really want to acknowledge it? Instead, do it. See, the more you can write down, the better. It's the opposite. And then you can move into an hour of goodness. And then for an hour, you sustain and track, and you watch what your thoughts are, and you watch your feelings, you watch your habits, you think about your addictions, you think about what needs to go, you think about what's been residing there that's blocking. These things are all blocking your goodness. If they're there instead, then you have them instead of the goodness. And, it takes a huge amount of discipline to overcome these lower tendencies. I'm not going to discount that, because it really does. But once you've done the work and just displaced it with the goodness, it's really easy. And living becomes so much easier, even in these completely bizarre times that we're living in. You feel your force field. Yes, it matters what's going on in the world, because you care about your fellow man, you care about humanity, and you know that we're all one. And and others' suffering affects our field. But it also doesn't matter, because you're there, so you're not as dependent on it. However, what I do want to say that's very important, having said all this, is that I do believe that the reason that we're not living our fullest human experience and feeling as much power and goodness as we should be, as we're designed to, is because there's so much pain and suffering in the world, and because we're all so connected. It makes sense. It follows that our brethren that are suffering, that pain is causing our pain and also suppressing the forces from flowing through humanity. So as things are rectified in the world, which I believe it's actually happening now, I strongly believe it's happening, and I think it's also why so many of us are feeling such surges of well-being right now that we've never had before, just exponentially greater, is because so much suffering is being alleviated. So much of that state that the world's been in, and the suffering that's been caused for so long is now coming to an end. So as that happens, even in small amounts, it's going to have a huge impact on us through humanity. If you're open to it, if you're in sync with it. I mean, naturally you're going to feel it either way, but you'll feel it even more if you're aware and in sync with what's actually happening. So, you start with a minute, move on to an hour, maybe a day. Next thing you know, you'll be having a week of goodness, a month of goodness, a year of goodness, a lifetime of goodness, and the power will grow and grow and grow. You'll have to have a lot of consistency of your practices. So, for example, I do my training 5 days a week, no matter what, and it's part of my physical strength. I am fully committed to the integrity of my physical strength being optimal. And so I lean into it. I embrace it. It's hard. It's really hard. Every time it's hard. I work with my wonderful sensei, who I've spoken about many times. And he challenges me every day, but I embrace the challenge. And, I'll share with you one of my favorite things that he says is, and this helped me because, as many of you know, I've been in quite a huge trial in my life in the last couple of years. He always says, what is it he says now? Oh, yes. So when it's really, really hard, like, not when you're on your first, second, or third push-up, but when you're on your 14th, 15th, 16th push-up, and you're like, and you're trying to really, get your chest to the ground and push back up, and it's hard. I've got a small upper body. I never really had big strength up top, but this is just an example. You say, push through now. This is where all your gains are made. This is where all your gains are made. So when things are hard, when they're really, really hard, when you're thinking, oh, this discipline business, I just don't think that moment that's really, really hard, that you're overcoming your lower tendency, your inclination toward your lesser response, toward indulging your addiction, whether it's something you're consuming by mouth, or you're consuming by mind, or you're indulging in your emotional field, that is when you're overcoming it. That is when the gains are made. That's when the birth is happening of the new expression. And so if just write it down somewhere, because honestly, that single sort of adage, or what would you call it, that single encouragement had probably the biggest effect on my journey of the last 2 years, when I've had to face the worst pain of my entire life. So and in those moments, and what you'll find is, if you can just get through that moment where everything feels so intense and you just don't think you can get through, and you remind yourself, this is where all the gains are made, and you persevere, it passes. And something happens. It's kind of like the journey of the hero. For those of you who are familiar with Joseph Campbell, the hero with 1,000 faces, if you're not, please research that. There's for the one who takes on the hero's journey, there is this supernatural help. There are these moments, serendipitous moments, that come along, and just when you don't think it could get any worse, if you're doing the right thing, you get this help. And it's not the help you necessarily expect, but it's something, and it works. It's miraculous, these moments when you're just doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, not because there's anything pleasant about it, or you think there's any reward, because usually it doesn't feel rewarding. But we all know the right thing to do, and we get better into better alignment with what the right thing is as we go. In fact, again, as I was asked about how I did this, I think we had a little bit of a blip there. Anyway, so let's see. Hi, Sally. So good to see you there. How do you protect yourself against the negative forces when sleeping? It's my most vulnerable time, and often feels like a battle for my own life force against malevolent entities. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I've had what is it called, sleep paralysis before, and I actually think it runs in families. I think it's part of let's say, a kind of often like a shamanic line, and I don't know if it's the same thing that you're referring to, but you feel like you're in a very vulnerable position, because there's kind of an entity, an energetic form that is, I know this sounds crazy for those who haven't had this experience, but it can almost feel like it's on you, and you're kind of between worlds, because you're not completely asleep, but you're not awake. And okay, so what I did, and I'll just tell you from experience, just because it's I like to speak from experience when I can, and I can in this case. After it happened a few times, I have a great spiritual teacher, and she's a Sangoma. It's a medicine woman, and a South African medicine woman, and she told me that I needed to be very, very direct with this entity, whatever this thing was, and tell it needed to go, and be very firm and speak directly, which is what I did, and with absolute conviction, tell it to get out of your space. It's not allowed here, and it needs to leave. And you say it firmly, and I don't think you even need to say it more than once. I don't think I did, but you can say it a few times if you need to, if you like to do things in threes or something. And it never happened to me again. It's like, this is my space, you are not allowed here, and you need to leave now. And over and out, done. Never happened again. So, I think you also, and you probably know this, but setting your sleeping space so that everything is life generating in your space, that, it's very well ordered. You know, we want to make sure that there's lots of flow. That's the whole feng shui thing. You know, it has to be space for energy to flow. So our space needs to be purified. You know, if you want to use essential oils or sage or, you know, San Paulo, is that the other one? And whatever it is, it's natural forces. Open your windows, you know, just whatever you need to do to keep things fresh. And it's really important because, you know, energy, it takes shape. So these entities, they tend to either, which is kind of strange, they're feeding on your light, or they're coming around because you have an addiction and they know that they can get in with that. That's why alcohol is called spirits. You know, it's actually, you're taking in an entity when you're consuming alcohol. That's why people who are, you know, very careful spiritually don't consume any alcohol. You're actually, you know, taking in something that has a, let's say, a non-life generating aim. It has a little bit of life in it. It's a life that would feed off of you, which is, it's complicated. It's a whole nother level of things, but that prayer isn't necessarily what people think it is. You know, what I just demonstrated there was taking authority. So that wasn't a prayer. That was asserting authority. And prayer is a state of being. So we're actually always praying. And we're always praying for something because we're in a state of, you know, of being, of imagining something, of having a vision. Prayer is kind of like visioning. So what you want to see is, you want to see yourself in a protected, empowered state. And hold that as long as you can. I mean, that's something we should be holding all day, every day, all the time. But certainly in the hour leading up to your bedtime, remembering, I am sovereign. I'm filled with the goodness and the forces of goodness. See yourself as that, and that is the prayer. And then these things can't get in. That's not to say that you won't have nightmares, because remember, the subconscious is always speaking to us and showing us images and symbols that are primal. So what we might think of when we have a dream and we have symbols, we see things, we can't think about, well, you know, what do we think this is? Or how, you can, first of all, you can think about how it made you feel, because that will give you a lot of big indication to interpreting your dreams. But I'm very, very big on dreams. I dream vividly every night. And I try not to allow myself to open my eyes until I've captured my dreams, as many as I can, and try to interpret them to some degree. And, you know, these symbols are, you know, they're very ancient, so we have to think about them in terms of what they actually mean in an ancient context as opposed to in a modern context. But anyway, that's a whole different story with dreams. But taking authority back and taking on this new understanding of prayer, so that you become what's the word? You become impenetrable, because those things can't cohabitate with a being that is filled with light. So what are these blind spots? What are some of the shadows that they may be feeding on? Or why may they be feeding on your light? They can only do so if you're not taking authority. So predatory people that prey on children, for example, the children don't have the strength to protect themselves. So they lack the authority and protection to take care of themselves, to defend themselves. So these forces of darkness prey on them so easily. So if we're vulnerable because we haven't brought ourselves to a state of sovereignty through the forces of goodness, you know, we can have these things come in. Or if we have unrealized dark corners that they're feeding on, we can bring them in. Those are different ways of looking at it. Okay. Any other questions, guys? This has been great. I hope this has been communicated well. I'm happy to share more in the fullness of time, and we can dig in. Maybe as you sit with it and think about it more, you'll have more questions. but this is the biggest, greatest health secret of all time. The forces of goodness. Truly, truly, truly. And you'll get so strong. Set the bar for this. You know, there's no, everything else in life you can address from your strength once you've achieved that strength, once you've gotten to the point where you've fully integrated all of this and you've displaced all those anti-energetic forces. You will transform. You'll become. I mean, I know it's easy in a way, I guess, for me to say it, but only because I've experienced it. And yeah, I just really hope you guys will take it on, and I'm here to help support it in any way I can. Okay. Have the most amazing Sunday. Thank you all for being here, and for anyone who listens after, it's been a real joy and pleasure, privilege to communicate all this. Okay, well, let's see, there's another question here. How do you help children face this? I find myself having to enforce certain rules, yet trying to cultivate empowerment. Let's see, wait. Not letting me see more. See more, please. Okay. Cultivate empowerment in my children. Yeah, I think with kids, look, I mean, what do I know? I only have 3, but I'm kidding. I don't necessarily feel that I've been successful in doing this with my kids. I've hopefully been an example. I mean, my 2 older kids aren't so interested to know these things. They do things more or less the way the world wants them to, and you think, well, they were raised by me, that it should be different somehow. Well, I mean, I just think that in the fullness of time, the example and my lifestyle will be reflected through them, but I don't know what their destiny is. I don't know what lessons they have to learn along the way, and it's my business and my duty to try to be that which I believe and to embody it and obviously live it. I couldn't live any other way, frankly. I mean, I there's no alternative for me, but they've been watching me their whole lives, and and they've taken it in. So I think it's all you can do. And also we can't force these things. It's also, it's interesting because we can be strong, but we don't want to be forceful. There's the force field and there's the forced field, and the Matrix wants to force us into things. And so it's the forced field. And then there's the network of life, the original energy that's not inverted. And it just is a force. It just exists. It's like, the sun will shine, but will people go outside? It's a force, but it's not forcing. It's not going to break down the doors and windows and say, everybody out, onto the lawn, into the sun, you're going to receive me. It doesn't do that. So I always find the sun is a useful example for things, for how we can live. It gives its warmth to everyone who wants to receive it. Doesn't give more warmth to the person on the left than the person on the right. If you're willing to get out of the shadows and into the sun, you'll get all the warmth, all the intelligence, because of course light is intel. So that's why we want to expose our bodies to the light and receive that, that powerful energy that will confer its intelligence into our blood, into our bones, into our mind, and everything else, and give it know-how. There's getting know-how, and there's being dumbed down. The Matrix dumbs you down. The network of life gives you know-how. Okay. All right. I guess that wraps it up. Once again, you guys have a wonderful Sunday. It's wonderful to be with you. And until next time, lots and lots of love.